Make sure you check out our online store where we work with our graphic designer to create stunning garment and product designs that feature a wide variety of aircraft types such as British fighters, World War II aircraft, American bombers, Russian fighters and much more. You can pick your favourite designs and personalise any items within our Redbubble store that range from clothing right the way through to stationery. All of our designs feature our logo so you can show your support for the channel while getting a quality product. You can head to our website aircrewinterview.tv and click store, or go to redbubble.com/people/AC interview. Thank you and enjoy. Yeah, we're going to get on to what all our viewers are being really fascinated about is the MiG-25. Obviously, you mentioned that's the first one you went on to, but yeah, so like talk us through how you got selected to fly the MiG-25, and was it the MiG-25R, if I'm correct?
That's right. We only had the MiG-25R. Mm-hmm. The Indian Air Force only contracted for the MiG-25R. And what we got were 6 single-seaters, the R, and 2 two-seat trainers. And you would have seen the trainer is the most unusual trainer, you know.
Yeah, it's very odd. It looks weird, doesn't it?
An elevated cockpit. But what you would understand as an aviator is, you know, the thinking or the logic behind that was fantastic. To me, the MiG-25 trainer was probably designed after the fighter was, because on this two-seater trainer, the student is sitting at the back, unlike most training aircraft where the instructor sits at the back in a tandem. Here, the student sits at the back. And when you look from the rear cockpit, because it's stepped up, you cannot make out the front cockpit. It's part of the nose.
Oh, really?
Yes. So to me, what the Russians actually did was take a fighter, remove the camera. The camera was huge, as you know. Camera was as big as a small sofa set, I would say, a two-seater sofa set. So they removed the camera and put a cockpit. And the canopy sort of merges with the design of the nose as seen from the rear cockpit. So the student is sitting there. So you do your training, those 3 sorties or 4 sorties of, you know, two-seater training sorties with the instructor. And when you go solo, there is no change. There's no difference. Mm. So I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Just the thought behind it, that when you transition someone from you send someone solo on a new aircraft, he's not getting into something unfamiliar. He's absolutely in exactly the same place where he's always been.
Yeah, it's very logical, isn't it? Yeah, logical thinking there.
Yes.
But let's talk about what was the role of the MiG-25 with the Indian Air Force at your time when you joined, or you were flying it, sorry.
Well, R is the recce version. And you will also understand that because of the heights and the speeds that the aircraft flew at, which was what it was optimized for, it had to be strategic reconnaissance and not tactical reconnaissance. Mm-hmm. So the R version is basically a strategic reconnaissance airplane, which will give you data and information on static infrastructure and systems that are there in enemy territory. Mm-hmm. But if there's a moving object or tactical stuff that goes on, moving radars and stuff like that, you will not be able to get those, because you fly one mission, you'll probably get it. In the next mission, it's not there. Mm. So one has to understand that these were strategic reconnaissance airplanes and not for tactical use. The Indian Air Force used it in its tactical role actually only once, and that's in the 1999 Indo-Kargil War. The Kargil War, Indo-Pakistan Kargil
Yes.
War, 1999, where we used it in the tactical sense at low level. You didn't use it at low level. Firstly, everything was analogous. So we had these cameras which, had these huge film rolls, and which you had to develop and, the routine stuff. And so it was a long process. And so the usage was limited to high altitude, high speed, because of the apertures and the fixed apertures and stuff like that, and the speed at which the airplane went. You had to have what they called a V by H ratio to maintain, to get a swath and the correct overlap of the frames. It would be, it's clicking frame by frame.
Oh, right, got you, yes.
Right. So frame by frame, and if you didn't have the correct V by H ratio, that is the velocity by height, you got gaps in the frames on the film, or you got excessive overlap where you couldn't read the picture. Now, the V by H ratio automatically gets controlled by the computer, and as long as you're flying at within those heights and speeds. Excuse me. So if you tell me that, okay, I want a tactical picture, and you get down to, say, 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers, say 8,000, 6,000, 10,000 feet, and get me a film, because you've got great cameras, I can't, because I'll have to fly at a speed which is unrealistic.
Right.
And I don't get the V by H ratio to give me a correct picture. So the lowest that I could get a tactical picture was at 6.5 kilometers. Flying subsonic, 6.5 is 20,000 feet and more, 21, 22,000 feet. Is the lowest I could come to do a tactical sort of a picture for anyone.
Wow.
So we would fly only above 65, 70,000 feet to get the strategic picture. And I would give a swath of film for the range that I fly or the distance that was required, with the lateral coverage of 92, 93 kilometers, say 90,
Wow.
say 90. And running, if I'm running 600 kilometers this way, so I've got a swath that I can give you of a clear picture of 600 by 90.
Wow. I mean, what an impressive aircraft. I mean, even looking at it, for me, every time I see it, it's a very intimidating aircraft. But when you put it in the recce role, it's completely different.
Yes. The recce version came out much later, as I understand. They had the fighter first. And I think the MiG-25A was the original fighter, which they probably designed to hit the U-2s and the SR-71s. That was the purpose behind the whole thing. But what we have gathered sometimes is that they had a look-down, shoot-down capability too on the MiG-25A.
Yes.
At a later date, where they claimed they could shoot down cruise missiles. So
Yes.
I don't know. I'm not too sure, but that's what we heard.
What was it like going through your ground training, going from obviously the MiG-21 to a recce platform, and obviously the flying clothing? And was that comfortable? Because it looks a bit uncomfortable, but how did you feel about this?
At the outset, we had the MiG-25 for 25 years, from 1981 through 2006. So we had the aircraft for 25 years. And let me tell you, Mike, 90% of the Indian Air Force never, ever saw the aeroplane.
Right.
Yeah. So it was kept as a super secret weapon, I would say. It was kept away from prying eyes. Nobody was allowed to visit the unit. Nobody was allowed to come close. On the base, we had another squadron of aircraft, but ours was special. We had a double layer fencing around the unit. We had these guard dogs, German shepherds and Doberman pinschers and stuff like that, guard dogs, and policing the place. And our programs, our flying was not routinely passed on to everybody, because things get accessible to people as to who's flying when and how and all that.
Yes.
So it would be limited. So only the ATC knew, and so they would regulate. And because these missions, when you fly, apart from your training, of course, and even when we trained like that, to say that the missions will be silent.
Wow.
You could ask for a takeoff, but normally you didn't. The only RT call you ever gave was 3 greens for a landing. So you had a time given to the ATC for takeoff, and you just started up and you went onto the runway. And he kept the airfield clear of traffic. At that time, he knew that the one person who would know that this is the time scheduled for takeoff. You would go for your mission. That's it. You've gone. And the ground radars, the surveillance radars, they would call you in case there was a threat.
Right.
Otherwise, you flew the mission all silent, absolutely quiet, not a word, till you came back for landing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
A bit lonely, but then the missions were not too long.
Yeah, so like maybe how long was an average mission? You probably can't tell us too many details, but were they like
About
average?
an hour.
About an hour. About an hour, right. Is that because there was so little fuel on board? Because them burners look huge. Like I'm guessing, did you take off and reheat as well, or afterburner every time?
Yes. It had very little fuel. Mm-hmm. Only 20 tons.
Only.
So the aeroplane, it was strange. It was a 20-ton aeroplane with 20 tons of fuel. Mm-hmm. So 40 tons on takeoff. The belly tank, it could carry a belly tank, mm-hmm. which had a limitation of 1.5 Mach. So if you were transiting beyond 1.5 Mach, you had to drop the tank. Mm. The tank was one MiG-23 under the belly.
Okay.
One full MiG-23 under the belly.
Wow.
It had as much fuel as a full internal fuel of a MiG-23.
Internal, yeah. Crikey.
So that was the size of the tank. It was huge. And so on a mission, you wouldn't use it because you wouldn't like to drop that tank on somebody somewhere. And I don't think that would be very comfortable. So you flew the tank only for training sorties and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that you knew the carriage, and she sort of waddles with the tank full. when you're 40 tons, it carries fuel in the fins.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
600 kgs in the fins.
It's basically a plate. It's just a rocket with fuel on, isn't it? That's all it is.
Yeah. So you're sitting on a fuel tank, literally,
Yes.
when you're flying, and that's maybe I'll tell you about it. That's the only fear that I felt, and I'm sure a lot of people feel about when people say that, okay, fighter pilot, you're fearless. Sure, we're fearless, but there's always that little element.
No, there's something in there.
Everybody, I think suffers from, and if they deny it, there's something wrong. And I would say that my fear was of flying on the MiG-25 was we didn't fly in the troposphere like all the other airplanes do. We flew in the stratosphere, where the sky was no more blue, and so you're flying at 70,000 feet, say 20 kilometers or 22 kilometers of height, and you're flying sitting on a fuel tank, and if your fire warning light comes on, Mike, I think we are all very clear that if you got that much of gas on you and you got your fire warning on, there's not much you can do if the extinguisher hasn't worked and it doesn't go off. You got to get out.
Yes, of course.
The ejection seat on the MiG-25 was the same as the MiG-21, the 23, the 25, and the 27. So they had two settings. One was at 3 kilometers, that is 10,000 feet, and one was at 6 kilometers, which was 20,000 feet. So we set it at 6 kilometers, especially because of the hills that we have in India and the Himalayan range and all that. So you set it at 6 kilometers for the seat separation, for the seat separation and the parachute opening, right? You have a seat setting, altitude setting, activated by barometric pressure. The fear was of the unknown is that if I have to hop out of an airplane because of fire, or say, at 20 kilometers of height, and my parachute is not going to open till I hit 6 kilometers of height.
Oh my God, yeah.
So I'm going to have a free fall of 14 kilometers of free fall, where the ambient temperature there is minus 85 to minus 90 degrees Celsius. Our skin temperatures, incidentally, at those speeds were plus 300 degrees Celsius. So you're flying an aeroplane with the outside skin temperature of plus 300 degrees Celsius through ambient temperature of minus 90. If I have to hop out, I have to hop out in an environment of minus 90 degrees with the pressure so low. And then I have a free fall of 14 kilometers. It's not a very comfortable thought. To get back to a question that you'd asked earlier, Afterburner, we always used Afterburner for takeoff. We use Afterburner for takeoff on all the airplanes, all the MiG variants in India, other than the MiG-29.
Yes.
So MiG-29 also we've used with the Afterburner, not a problem, because with the Afterburner on the MiG-29 you can do a takeoff on, you could do in a loop on takeoff. That's the power. Anyhow, so you take off on the MiG-25 with the Afterburner, and you don't come off the Afterburner until you come in for a landing. The entire mission is flown with Afterburner from the time you take off.
Wow.
You climb out, and to give you a sort of an idea of the sheer power of the aeroplane, if I had to take off and if I had to do a reciprocal turn, if I'm going to a mission somewhere that side, by the time I turn around and I come back in line with the point where I took off from, the landing dumbbell. I'm crossing 10 kilometers of height and a speed of 1.1 Mach. That's 30,000 feet and 1.1 Mach. By the time I've raised my wheels, flaps, accelerated a little bit, commenced the turn, and reached here, I'm crossing 30,000 feet, 10 kilometers, 1.1, and accelerating. At around 18 kilometers or so, we would come back from the max afterburner to min afterburner, minimum. Because if you didn't come back, she was crossing 20 kilometers if you kept it on. Again, as a relationship example, a MiG-21 best rate of climb at sea level was 110 to 130 meters per second for a MiG-21. The MiG-25 in rarefied atmosphere of 20 kilometers of height, 70,000 feet, was crossing 20 kilometers at 100 meters per second. Same as the MiG-21 at sea level. She's crossing 20 kilometers at 100 meters per second.
Wow.
That was brute force.
Oh, brute force, yeah.
Brute power. So you came back to minimum afterburner, and there was an onboard computer which sort of found the optimized altitude for you for the fuel that had been consumed against the fuel that was consumed. So she leveled out on her own, I would say, and you got the indications. Around 19.7, 19.8, 20.1, somewhere there, around 20 kilometers. And then she would, you kept minimum afterburner for the rest of the mission.
Right, min burn.
And as the fuel got consumed, she would fly. When you do your aerodynamics, you learn that little m equal to 1 gives you the maximum range. She would fly to maintain little m equal to 1 to give you, and she would cruise climb sort of all the way. So you would typically start the mission around 20 and wind up at about 21.8, 22 kilometers of altitude. And the cruise climb would be so gradual that it never affected the cameras. The rate of climb was so gentle that it didn't affect your photography. And that was it. So you came up at about 22 kilometers by the time you decided to get back. And now when you get back, you come back and you switch off the burners. And then you come to idle and you glide back home 350 kilometers of distance.
Really?
Throttles back to idle, yes.
Wow.
So you're gliding throttles back at idle 350 kilometers to touchdown.
Wow. That I never knew that. That is really impressive for a big bird like that. But as I just mentioned there, Sumit, can you tell us a bit about the flight gear? Because did you feel comfortable in it, and was it safe, do you think, for that environment?
The comfort of the suit.
Yeah.
The pressure suit, when you look at it, Mike, is actually the same suit that Yuri Gagarin wore, the first man in space.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, almost the same. Probably he had a few more alterations to it because of space flight. But essentially, it's the same suit. The MiG-21s had it. The MiG-23s had it because they were designed for interception at 18, 19, 20 kilometers. So as a pilot officer, I have flown that with the same pressure suit also. So many years before that.
Yeah.
But that was very little. You just flew a couple of sorties to understand what it's all about. Here you were flying it all the time. And so it's a skin tight suit, and it's a skin tight suit which you cannot put on, wear or take off on your own. You have to be helped into and out of by somebody else.
Right.
So you had your normal underwear and your vest, and then on top of that you wore silk inners, long johns, full leggings, and full sleeve, round necked, silk inners, on which you slid the suit up. She would slide only on the silk. She wouldn't slide on the skin.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. And having put it on, you zip up and, please get to the loo before you get into that suit. Because you couldn't go to the loo once you got the suit on. No, sir. No, sir, you couldn't. So now you zip it up, and then you have these technicians who'll come and they'll pull these laces. You have laces on your arms, you have laces on your chest, laces on your thighs, laces on your back, and laces right down to your calves, to tighten the suit till it's till the point of discomfort, I would say.
Right.
Where you can just breathe adequately. Because you would understand that if I have to go through a decompression at that altitude, and what it does, you don't want your blood to boil out all over.
Of course, yeah.
You need to have the thing, your body compressed. So the pressure suit had to be that tight. And you had pressure gloves. We didn't have pressure socks, unfortunately. And then you had this helmet. The helmet was in two parts. You had a neck ring, and the neck ring had a bladder, which was like a condom. You wear it.
Like down. Yeah.
Snug. And then you put this helmet with about 2.5 kilograms. That's a very heavy helmet. You put that on your head, and then it locks onto the neck ring. Helmet locks onto the neck ring. And you have a faceplate which is open for you to keep up for normal thing until you reach your takeoff point. At takeoff, you close that.
Right.
And lock it.
Right.
So, and then once you wore the suit with all the threads and the laces hanging all over, although they tucked it in, you had to wear a lightweight flight suit on top to prevent the threads catching any of the switches and levers and stuff like that in the cockpit.
Wow. Yeah.
So effectively, you were wearing your underwear, you were wearing your silk inners, you were wearing the pressure suit, and you were wearing a lightweight flying overall on top of it all. So 4 layers of clothing, and you have an temperature in India of 35, 38 degrees, 40 degrees sometimes Celsius. You walk to the aeroplane from the crew room, and say a 10-minute walk, and you get in the cockpit. The inertial platform used to take about 45 minutes to erect.
Wow.
It was first generation inertial platform. But what they did was that they started the APU, and they started the inertial platform erection through external battery sources 45 minutes before you went to the cockpit. So when you got in the cockpit, it was ready. So you had minimum time. But the walk to the airplane, 10 minutes, strap up and get in, close the canopy. To reach the runway, another 10, 15 minutes. Say 20, 25 minutes with that suit and the heat. And Russian aeroplanes do not have air conditioning below 6,000 feet. I think others have told you about this.
Yes, yeah, I've heard that before, yeah. Oh my God.
So by the time you reach the takeoff point, you're already dripping in sweat, and you take off. Once you hit 2 kilometers or 6,000 feet, your air conditioning kicks in, and then it's wonderful like any other airplane. When you come back to land from at 6,000 feet, it's cut off again. So with some residual cooling, you come in for landing, but then you have another 20 minutes to get back to where you are. So by the time you get back, you're wet, you're soaked in perspiration, and there's no way you can get out of the suit. So the other thing was that if I have to eject in enemy territory, I have to make the great escape. And how do I make the great escape wearing a suit like that? So we actually trained to take that suit off on our own without any help from the technicians who put us into the suit.
Sumit, can you tell us some of the strengths and weaknesses of the MiG-25?
To start with the strengths, the strength was its height and speed, and the quality of the cameras for the era that it was designed in. So, frankly speaking, the aircraft got phased out, or it lived its life because the satellite technology took over, and they were able to give you better pictures and submetric resolutions of a very high quality. But in its time, the cameras were very good on the MiG-25. And of course, it had its height and speed for the job that was at hand, which was deep into enemy territory, to get in fast and high, take the photographs of strategic targets, and exit safely. So in this entire capsule, I think it was very well designed, and it met its role very, very effectively. Weaknesses were obviously the gas or the fuel that it contained. A huge amount, 20 tons, and that's with the tank on. And so if you had 20 tons of gas, it seems a fair amount. But when you're flying the entire mission with the Afterburner, you can understand that the gas does get consumed rather fast. So you actually had an endurance of just about an hour, and or shade over an hour. And so when you're flying at, of course, 2,500 kilometers per hour, you're covering the distance in that 1 hour. So as far as distance is concerned, as far as the photography swath is concerned, you do meet the requirements. But sometimes you feel that if I had a little more gas, maybe I could have done a little more.
So could you actually talk us through an average day as a MiG-25 pilot with the Indian Air Force?
And before that, let me give you an anecdote, or I would say just a little story to keep the smile on everybody's face, or who was willing to listen to this commentary. It's regarding the cooling systems on the aircraft. You will understand that when you're flying at those speeds and those heights, as I told you, although the ambient temperatures are very low, the skin temperatures are very high, and they go up to plus 300 degrees Celsius. And so if the skin temperatures were high, if the aircraft was being heated up to that extent, you would understand that the avionics and the other electronic systems on board would get overheated. So there's always a cooling system in every aeroplane. It's there in every aeroplane. And in all aeroplanes, as you would know, the cooling systems are all by alcohol. Now, because of the very high temperatures in this case on these aircraft, the alcohol required to cool the systems on board was a fair amount that was required. So whereas, say on a MiG-21 or a MiG-23, you had a little bottle which had alcohol of 1 to 2 liters or something. The MiG-25 carried an alcohol tank of 200 liters. Now, to refuel 200 liters or to fill in 200 liters of alcohol into an aeroplane, you can't do it with little cans. So because of the evaporation and stuff like that. So they had these Bowsers, like a fuel tanker. Do you call them Bowsers? We call them Bowsers in India.
Right.
The fuel tank. The fuel tank. So there were many Bowsers or fuel tankers sort of thing, which were actually alcohol tankers. And so you took that alcohol tanker there and you filled in 200 liters of alcohol into the tank. And typical of Russian design, at the end of the tank at the bottom right corner, there was this little tap, and so this was for the technicians to cater for the evaporation. You would say? Oh, those Russians, they're so good at this sort of stuff. So that's the funny part about the alcohol, the large alcohol content and the facility of just taking a bottle home now and then. It was 98 proof alcohol. It's not too healthy, but
no.
But in the winters in Russia, you do drink it. Yes.
Yeah.
They called it technique spirit.
Okay. Right.
Uh-huh. So a typical day, I would say, if I was flying a mission, the planning that goes into a mission, those days everything was analog. So you sat with these huge maps, and we worked normally on a million map, 1:1 million. So we would do the planning, the tactical, the routing, and wherever we needed to go, the area to be photographed, and we needed to figure out the exact coordinates of that particular thing, of the targets that we needed to photograph, and the optimized route which would cater for the quantity of fuel that you had, and all that would be worked out on a map, on a table. So you normally got to work on it. It took you a couple of hours. So you had these large scales and the pencils and stuff like that, and you worked it out. So you needed to have a lead time to work out this. Once you worked out the waypoints, I would say, or the coordinates of every target, and your turning points, in case there was a turn involved, and where's the turn involved, where do you start the photography, where do you end the photography, when you restart photography, and when you re-end photography. That means you could do it in bits and pieces to optimize the consumption of the film roll. Mm-hmm. And thereafter, where do you exit the other country? And typically, because of the limitations of the range, as I told you, we didn't have air-to-air refueling facility. We didn't operate from our home base. Mm-hmm. We operated from forward bases. Mm-hmm. Now, you will also understand that because, did I tell you that we use special fuel? Mm-hmm. So we used special fuel, which was what was called, which was a high specific gravity, against the normal ATF, which has a specific gravity of 0.77. we had fuel which was had a specific gravity of 0.84. The highest specific gravity is what it does is it raises the flash point of the fuel because of the high temperatures and the wings and all the fuel tanks being within the close proximity of the surface. The higher specific gravity raises the flash point of the fuel. So if you are using special fuel, if you're going to operate from another base, you have to have that much, 20 tons for each mission of gas available to you at a forward base. And you cannot mix up the tanks. You cannot fill up this type of fuel into another tank which is containing something else. So our forward bases were marked, or earmarked, I would say, to say that these are the specific bases I could take off from or land at. Of course, I could land anywhere, but to be able to recover out of that, I would be needing gas to get out of that place. But to launch, I would launch from a base which was designated for me, which had the gas. Mm-hmm. And so there would be a flurry of activity in the squadron as far as the technicians are concerned to get the systems ready and everything correct. And you decided on, with the position of the sun, the optimized and the weather conditions, because there were strategic targets that were involved, you were not really constrained about doing it at a particular time on a particular day. I did have a leeway to cater for the weather and the clouding and whatever there is, because these are pure optical cameras. It needed clear weather. So you would select the time, date, everything, go through all the met forecasts, decide, do your planning on the map, and then you had this computer. Oh, this computer was fantastic. You have these little MIPS that you put into these aircraft nowadays with all the waypoints and everything. The planning is selected, little USB stuff. We had a USB which was about that big, as big as the laptop that I'm sitting in front of right now. Wow. That was the size of MIP that I had, and I would have to punch in the binary on that.
Wow.
The zeros and the ones, the zeros and the ones. Okay. From the takeoff point to the top of climb to waypoint 1, waypoint 2, waypoint 3, waypoint 4, whatever it is. Now the waypoints in this case for our type of aircraft are not like the Jaguar low-level navigation waypoints, where you're doing a certain tactical routing. These waypoints were actually where the camera comes on, camera goes off. So the computer allowed you, the autopilot and the computer match up, or the integration, actually allows you to fly this aeroplane hands off from takeoff to landing, virtually.
Impressive.
Yeah. So she would climb on her own. She would level off on her own at an optimized height, and she would open up her cameras on a designated waypoint as you've selected on the computer and pre-programmed. She would open up the cameras, take the photograph up to a certain point, switch off the camera, continue, switch on the camera again, switch off the camera as and when you've programmed it. So once you've done the map planning, you've worked out the coordinates, you get your computer tablet, you punch in your coordinates, and you give it to the technician, and they fit it into the aircraft and push it to land. All right, so it was massive. So once that has gone in, you're all set, and now you're just waiting for time. Time factor-wise, there were two things that were needed to be done before you actually got to taxi out and take off. One was putting on your pressure suit, the time that it takes, and to be mentally prepared for what you're going to do. And the second was erecting the initial platform on the aircraft, which took a little time. In winters, it was pretty rapid. When I would say rapid, it's about 25 to 30 minutes rapid. And in summers, it was about 45 minutes. So I would give the technicians the time to put the systems on. And 20 minutes or half an hour before I was to walk to the aircraft, I would start putting on my suit and getting ready. As I told you, you need to use the toilet before you get into that suit. So get the suit ready, sit in an air-conditioned room because it's very hot outside with all that thing on. And then you've told the technician to put the systems on, the initial platform, to start its erection time. And when there's 10 minutes to go for the cycle to complete, the erection cycle to complete, they give you a call from the technical office to say that you can now walk. So you walk down to the airplane, and if it's a little far, you're taken by a vehicle. Otherwise, you walk down and get into the aircraft. So by the time you strap in and the initial platform is erected and ready for you. The systems are go. And now all you have to do is start the two engines one by one and taxi out and take off. So landing back, again, you get back. Once you land back, the first thing that the technicians do is lower the camera. As I told you, it's like a sofa set, a small sofa set. So there's a system of winches, and they're all manual, and you winch down the entire block, the camera block, and take out the rolls of film. The rolls of film were about, I would say, 12 to 14 inches and about 8 inches to 10 inches in diameter. And so you take out these 5 rolls of film from the camera, and you send them to the processing room. So we had these various sections, like every squadron has, for its various systems. There was another guy who did the ELINT work. And I don't know whether I told you, it had an ELINT system on board, the electronic intelligence. And it was a hardwired, pre-programmed thing. I couldn't do anything in the cockpit. So you had to pre-program the threat library and feed it in and leave it there. And when you flew the mission, she would pick up all the emissions. That had a fantastic range. It had a range of almost 1,000 kilometers.
Wow.
Yeah. So it could pick up frequency emissions at very vast ranges, depending on the strength of the frequency, of course. And so the camera guys took the film rolls. The ELINT guys took the ELINT data output from there, and you went to the respective sections to milk out or develop the films and get the information. Once the film, it's all in the dark room, and once the film, because analog, as I told you, and as and when the film was developed, the photo interpreter would always be there. We had a special photo interpreter posted to the unit, and a specialized guy, and he would be there supervising and the pilot would be called in, and the photo interpreter together. They would see the wet film as it's rolled out on a screen on a table, illuminated table, which would give you the first wet print picture of the target areas that you went over. He would also check the sort of overlaps or any mistakes made in or errors that have accrued because of whether it was flying, whether it was conditions, or whether it was mechanical systems problems, whatever it is, to see that each frame of the film is following accurately along the path. Mm-hmm. So you do have markings on the film which are telling you the lat long, the exact lat long of the frame, so you can see the progression is going accurately and correctly, and based on the input that the pilot gives the photo interpreter, and he's also been there in the planning anyhow. So we mark out that here's the target, here's the target, here's the target, and thereafter focus on those portions of the film that are relevant for future use by the strike pilots. So you take out the relevant portions of the film, and now you blow it up. And I could blow up say I'm sitting on a laptop, which is it's a 14-inch laptop, incidentally, and I'm sitting on. And the photo frame was about this size. One frame of the film was about the size of this 14-inch laptop. And I could blow up that picture without graining, without grains, and for a clear picture, absolutely, to about almost 5 feet.
Wow.
Yeah, 5 feet by 4 feet or so. About that much, huge. So I mean, I could blow it up that much. Around 4 feet onwards, it would start to grain, but still fairly clear. But otherwise, they were very sharp. Pictures were very sharp, black and white, and very sharp, and great clarity. As an example, I would say from 70,000 feet, flying at those speeds, I could pick up a guy on top of an aeroplane, a technician. If I ran over an airfield,
wow,
I could, I couldn't make out his hands and stuff like that. But I could make out there's a man on top of the aeroplane, fixing something. So, well, that's the sort of clarity that you got. So, this entire process of planning, getting ready, flying the mission, 1 hour mission, decoding, and everything was very long. It was 8 to 10 hours. Mm-hmm. And in strategic reconnaissance, you're not critical on time.
Of course.
Really. So you had the time to do everything correctly and clearly, and you produce the results to the agency that required it.
Absolutely. I mean, what a mission. Yeah, it's I've always been fascinated with reconnaissance missions. Even in this country, we had the Tornado, Jaguar. It's a fascinating mission. But Sumit, there's one famous incident you had, but maybe you can share that one with us with another memorable story. I think we're going to talk about the eclipse here.
I'll tell you the starting point and what really happened. I got a call from Air Headquarters. I was commanding the unit at that time. And I got a call from Air Headquarters to come there to the headquarters in Delhi. Actually, that's how we operated. I would get a call from Delhi to say that you come there, and then they would tell you there's a mission.
Okay.
You never got these on telephones and stuff like that.
It's very James Bond.
You would understand why.
Yeah.
So I went there, and so they told me that there's this team of scientists that want to meet you and talk with you. I said, certainly. So there was a presentation that was organized, and in the presentation there were these scientists from the solar observatories, and there were a group of them from different places, and I was one of the couple of guys who was there. And they said that, look, this is what we want to do. They said we want to film the solar eclipse from the stratosphere. Now, the solar eclipse it happened on the 24th or 28th of October, 1995. So there are a lot of telescopes that, people, all the scientists, they want to get data out of the solar eclipse. There's guys with telescopes all over the place. Mm-hmm. There are people in aeroplanes and, small aeroplanes and even transport aeroplanes doing photography of the eclipse. So they said it's not been photographed from the stratosphere because notwithstanding where you are, whether you're flying in a transport aircraft or whether you're on the ground or with a powerful telescope, there's always the medium which provides the resistance or the clarity, resistance to clarity. So you have dust particles and water droplets and stuff like that in the atmosphere. And so they said, we want you to get above that. And from the stratosphere where we always flew, and the sky was no more blue anyhow, they said that from there, we should get clearer pictures than anybody has ever got with anything else, with the regular telescopes. So it started by saying that we want you to chase the shadow and take a photograph of the shadow, with your belly cameras. So when I asked them what is the speed of the shadow, it turns out that the shadow travels at almost two and a half times the speed of the aeroplane at 2.5 miles. It travels at almost hypersonic at certain points. So I said, I won't be chasing the shadow. I will feed into the shadow and we'll give you the swath. So the cameras with a swath of, with a lateral coverage of 95 kilometers, we actually film the shadow, which comes like an ellipse. It's traveling over the ground, and it's about 45 to 50 kilometers was the width of the diameter of that elliptical path of the shadow. So we got that shadow. That was one of the sort of requirements. The other one was to film the corona around the sun at the time of the eclipse. The corona is the cloud around the sun at the time of the eclipse. And the corona, I'm given to understand, gives a lot of scientific data to these people for whatever they want to do. So the idea was to film the corona as the sun is going into the full eclipse, and thereafter, as the eclipse gets over, you would have seen pictures of the diamond ring, of a solar eclipse. Yeah. Just a little dot and the little ring around the sun. From that point on, the corona, whatever happens around the sun, there are a lot of things that they derive out of data from that information. So that was the idea. So I said, fine. so there's this very senior scientist who came and came to where we were operating from. And so he said, well, this is what it is and this is what we do. We started our planning. So I told him, I said, Professor, where's the camera? So, and before that, I told them, I said, I hope you understand that we have only belly cameras. I can't do any photography in front. This one will give you a camera to, do the photography in front. That's fine. So I asked the professor, I said, Professor, where's the camera? He said, yeah, it's coming. So I was wondering why it was so. Notwithstanding, after 4 or 5 days, almost a week's time, the camera came. Until then, he would sit with us and we would chat and talk. And as I told you, we couldn't show the airplane to people, so to anybody for that matter. And so he hadn't seen the airplane, and this camera came. And it was a box, which was about, bigger than this laptop, 1.5 times the size of this laptop, and about that high. And so he comes with this huge thing and he says, here it is. I said, what's this? He says, it's a camera. I said, you got to be kidding. I said, have you ever seen a fighter cockpit? He said, no. He said, no. So then I took him to the airplane and he climbed up the ladder, he looked inside, and he knew exactly what I was getting at, that a monster like this couldn't fit in. It wasn't as big as that, but it was finally a shade smaller than this 14-inch laptop, but I would say about 12 inches, definitely, and about 8 inches by 6 inches this way, and the length was about 12 inches. It was massive. It was a Hasselblad. For whatever reasons, they didn't want a video film, a moving film. They wanted stills.
Okay.
So it was a camera that operated at 25 frames per second or something like that. And so now the question was, he says, I'm sorry, I didn't know, but the cockpit was like this. How do you fit this thing? So I decided to, take my own decision at that moment of time, because to ask people to sort of do anything with the aeroplane, do some modifications and all, it's a big exercise, technical exercise, to get clearances and all that. So I took some decisions of my own. All aircraft have this coaming above the instrument panel to shield from the sunlight. We removed that coaming, and then firstly I said, look, I cannot have this monster in front of me and fly, because I'll have no forward vision. So I need to fly the two-seater.
Right.
So we decided to put the camera on the two-seater, and a chase aircraft, which was a fighter with the belly cameras, for the shadow. So there were two different missions that were flown, one behind the other. And we went around fitting this camera onto this top of the instruments. To align the camera to get the correct positions, we had to harmonize, like we harmonize our guns and rockets, rocket pods on an aircraft. You put it up on jacks, you put the aircraft into the flying attitude, or the actual angle of attack at a speed of, say, on a ground attack mission, at 900 kilometers per hour, the actual angle of attack of the airplane and the jacks are put, the aircraft is rigged in that position, and now the harmonization is done with the board in front, with various sights marked and all that. And now you harmonize the weapons, the gun sight, and everything else to that. I did exactly the same thing with this camera. It was not a fighter airplane, so I had to fabricate everything on my own. We did it in our workshop, and we put the aircraft up on jacks. He got us all these these huge NASA charts from which we figured out that on that particular day, with those temperature conditions and those atmospheric conditions, what would be the density altitudes and the various atmospheric conditions, I would say, and what angle of attack would the aircraft be flying at with those speeds and at those heights. So based on all that, we fitted the camera, got the alignments, hopefully it was right, and then we were ready for the mission. We flew it around noon, sometime around noon. I think the time was around 11:50, 11:55 or so. And what I did was, as the eclipse came, we fed into the path of the eclipse and waited for it to come and cover us. And I started the filming while the sun was still fully visible. Now, because I had to follow the sun accurately, you can't be looking at it. I had the camera installed in the front cockpit of the two-seater, and I was flying from the rear seat. That's the stepped-up one. And I was telling this guy when to click the camera for those 25 frames per second. And we were doing short bursts of, say, 5 seconds each or whatever. And we got these filters on our visors because you can't look at the sun at that time during the eclipse. It's not safe. Some filters came from Argentina, visor filters, which we pasted on. They were stick-on stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, from Argentina or someplace. And then I fabricated a small gun sight with some aluminium and stuck, the old graph paper which had the centimeter graph markings. And so I put the graph paper and I made a pinhole in the center at the cross section, at the center of the axis, I would say. And so I was peering through that and doing the flying so that my height and speeds are correct, because the angle of attack had to be correct at that altitude and those speeds for the camera to be correctly aligned with the elevation of the sun at that moment of time. So all these were mathematically derived by the scientists and by us in coordination to figure out an exact, sort of a accuracy, I would say, to get the camera aligned totally with the sun right through the flight of that mission. From the ground, the total eclipse, when it took place, from the ground, the eclipse was visible to the person on the ground for 42 seconds. Flying at 2.5 Mach in the stratosphere at 80,000 feet. We flew at 80,000 feet. I got to see the eclipse for 2 minutes and 20 seconds, or a little more.
Wow.
Yeah. So we were in total eclipse, pitch black, dark night conditions, stars in the sky, and just flying, maintaining direction, maintaining speed and height, correct, and the camera's clicking away. And when the eclipse got over and the diamond ring came, so we got the essential diamond ring that everybody gets, even from the ground telescope you get the diamond ring. But the better picture that we thought, and which the professor blew it up, and he presented the Air Force with this particular picture, was maybe a second or two later, after the diamond ring comes up, the sun rays go through the various ridges and of the mountain ranges on the moon. So when it pierces that, it's like a starburst, It's a huge starburst in front of you, and I don't know whether I sent you the picture.
Yes. Well, I found it online, but it's amazing. You didn't send me it, but I found it. It's incredible.
So that's the starburst. And we thought that is a more unusual picture under the circumstances, because the diamond ring is a very common thing that one has seen over the years. And this starburst, nobody has pictured because it's an instant of time.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an instant of time. And the clarity of that picture was phenomenal because of where we were. So the mission was successful. Scientists were very happy with the results. Essentially, the sortie was flown for the scientists, and we did it.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, what a story. I mean, a lot of our viewers have been contacting me before we even got on this chat and said ask them about this and ask them about the eclipse, and what a story, Sumit. I mean, what a privilege to be a part of something like that. I'm guessing, do you have a picture somewhere maybe in your house of that photo?
Yes, I have a small one.
Yeah.
I'll send it to you.
Perfect. Right, so we're going to wrap up I mean, this has been amazing on the MiG-25, because I want to get on to some more personal questions, but how many hours did you get on the MiG-25R?
I think around 725 hours.
Wow. That's incredible.
I flew it over 6 years. 6 years. 4 years was my first tenure, and then 2 years later, 10 years later, as the commanding officer. The MiG-29, like I told you, the MiG-21 was a fighter pilot's aeroplane. The MiG-29 is that and more.
Mm.
And more because it gives you, like the MiG-21, a level of confidence when you're sitting in that cockpit that I can outfight anything in the sky.
Mm.
The MiG-29, as your MiG-29 guys would have told you, has certain limitations. The engines burned the gas with this black trail. You could see a MiG-29 from 20, 30 miles away. If we engage the afterburner. If I'm on a cruise in dry power, you will not see me. But if I engage the burners, the moment I engage the burners, there's this black smoke trail, which you can pick up from 20, 30 miles away. So it was a giveaway. It was a giveaway as far as that aircraft is concerned. So as a rule, we would engage it only when required in air-to-air combat because of the visual thing. But of course, the radar was a different ballgame altogether. It was my first experience with the Beyond Visual Range missile system on board, and with the infrared
sensor,
tracking system. So since the aircraft is still flying, I will not talk about it and how we employed it. But needless to say that the systems on board were good for its time. The version of the MiG-29 that I flew was the initial version. What we have today in the Indian Air Force is the upgraded version, which is as good as a Su-30 capability, upgraded to that capability, and with wonderful systems on board, glass cockpits and stuff like that. I never flew a glass cockpit. fantastic handling capability without fly-by-wire. I mean, when you say you're in the 9G club, well, you're in the 9G club all the time, virtually. In that, it's so easy. It was so responsive. So it was because of sheer maneuverability. If you're doing a close-in combat with somebody, a visual combat, so within visual range bubble combats, I don't think anything would touch it, other than probably the new 5th generation airplanes. There was nothing that could touch it. I had the confidence that it could go through anything. I got to fly 3 chiefs of air staff of other air forces. I flew the Royal Air Force chief, I flew the Singapore Air Force chief, and I flew the Luftwaffe Air Force chief. And do I have the time to tell you about?
Absolutely, yeah, go for it, Sumit.
Air Chief Marshal Sir Peter Harding of the Royal Air Force. So I was called into another base where he was visiting, the Mirage base actually. And I was told that you're required here to bring your 2-seater. We'd like to fly the Royal Air Force Chief. He's expressed a desire to fly the MiG-29 because the Mirages he had flown. So I flew in there with my 2-seater, and so I was all set. I met the air chief, and tall, strapping gentleman, wonderful person, individual, 6 feet 4 inches tall, and I'm 5 feet 6 inches. So you could imagine. So he sat down for the briefing, and I started to brief him. So he was to fly with me from the rear seat, and I started to brief him. And I told him what happens on takeoff, and I told him we'll do a dry takeoff because I could do an afterburner takeoff with you, not a problem, but you would get left behind so badly, because the aircraft is so fast and so rapid, the acceleration is so rapid, that you wouldn't really enjoy it to that extent. So I said, we'll do a dry takeoff. And I was told very categorically by my boss there on the base, as well as the Royal Air Force ADC and the staff officer who was with him, to say that the chief has a spondylosis issue and he is not to be put through aerobatics. I said, are you sure? I mean, that's what the MiG-29 is all about, the maneuver. They said, no, he has a issue with his spondylosis issue, so you can't put him through all this. He's limited to 3G.
Oh.
So I said, okay. So I briefed him, and as I started the briefing to say that, this is what we'll do, this is it, he put his hand up and he stopped me. He says, son, may I say something? I said, certainly, sir. He says, son, this is going to be the 123rd aeroplane I'm going to fly in my life.
Wow.
I have done the takeoff and the landing on every aeroplane that I fly. May I do the takeoff and the landing? I said, certainly. So I just told him what is to be done. And he was what I've heard and what I had heard and understood was that he'd been an instructor for a very long period of time himself. So on the takeoff roll, he was giving me, what we call patter as an instructor. You talk as whatever the aircraft is doing as it moves along. And that's an ability and a quality and a training that needs to go through. He was giving me patter as good as anybody else on his first ever trip on a MiG-29. I was amazed at his professional capability at that age, and hats off. Honestly, I was so impressed. Absolutely. Anyhow, we went up, and I asked him, I said, sir, would you like to, he moved the aeroplane around here and there. Then I asked him, I said, would you like to do a stall and recovery? He said, you do stall and recovery on a fighter aeroplane? I said, yes, sir. So he said, okay. So we did the stall and recovery, and he followed me on the controls, and we did the stall and recovery, and we recovered. A MiG-29 loses 50 feet in a stall and recovery. You can barely feel it. Yeah. She's so forgiving. She's so forgiving. So he said, "Is that it?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I'd like to do one myself." So I said, "Go ahead." So he did that. Very happy. Then we flew around. I showed him the area. Then I asked him, Sir, would you like to do some aerobatics?" He said, "I have a limitation. I have a medical limitation that I can't exceed 3G. So I'm sorry, I can't do aerobatics." I asked him, I said, "Sir, would you like to do a loop at 2.5G? Your limitation is 3G. Would you like to do a loop at 2.5G? He said, "It can't be done." So, well, if you wish, we could do it. Now he knew this was outside the briefing, and this was with no permissions from anybody. But the chief was willing to take the risk, and he said, "Show me." So we got down to 3,000 feet, a little lower, and I accelerated and did the loop at 2.5G. He was amazed at the handling ability or the capability of the aeroplane. He says, and I kept talking to him right through to ask him whether he was uncomfortable at any time with the 2.5G. And I showed him, here's the G meter, keep watching it. It's not going to exceed 2.5. And he went through the loop. I kept asking him, are you uncomfortable? He said, "I'm very comfortable." When we finished, he said, "This was amazing." He said, "Can I try it?" I said, "Certainly." So I talked him through it, and he did a loop on his own at 2.5G. He was so happy. When we got back, when he came out of the aeroplane, he was shouting at his ADCs. He had 2 or 3 officers, RAF officers with him. He said, I've done a loop today." And they had this horrified look, and they were looking at me as to what I had sort of gone against the instructions. But then the chief was so happy that he said, "No, I did a loop today. I'm so happy that I've done aerobatics." Yes. So that was a great experience.
Absolutely.
And so also with the Singapore HE was very, very, very fit, very fit.
I mean,
and they have F-16s, so yes. He wanted to fly the MiG-29, and he enjoyed himself. He stayed around between 7 and 9G most of the time.
Oh God. So we've got a question here from Joe Kunzler, one of our patrons. What's the fastest you have been in the MiG-25 Foxbat?
Oh, the fastest?
Yes.
Oh, we were limited to 2.83 Mach.
Oh, wow.
It was a limitation. The aircraft held a speed record of 3.2 Mach. We have exceeded 2.83. Let's put it that way, that when we have had no problems. You will find write-ups to say that the engine melts away above.
Yes, heard that before,
above 3 Mach. So that's why the limitation is 2.83. We have not had an engine meltdown. And
really?
Let me tell you that we have exceeded 2.83.
We'll leave it there, maybe.
And we've also hit 100,000 feet.
Oh. Wow.
Altitude, yes.
Crikey, bloody hell! I mean, that is moving, and that's high. So hopefully that answers your question there, Joe. But I've got a couple of personal questions to wrap up this interview, Sumit. Do you have any hobbies?
Yes, my hobbies are reading, music, and I play golf. And these are the 3 things essentially. Reading, different types over the years. PG Woodhouse has remained a favorite all along. I can always turn to PG Woodhouse just to take my mind off and relax. Just love his writings. Presently, I'm going through, I'm revisiting, I would say, James Jones and his books of From Here to Eternity and A Thin Red Line, those World War II books. Music, country and western, the classic country and western.
Nice.
Yeah, and my golf, I guess.
Brilliant. And this could be, well, I mean, you've flown so much, Sumit, but favourite aircraft you've flown?
Tough question.
It is.
Unfair question also, I would say, because
I know.
when you fly an airplane, you love it. The least that I flew were the MiG-23 and the MiG-27.
Okay.
So I never really got so fond of it, I would say, compared to the other three. The MiG-21, I had 1,300 hours, 1,300 hours on the MiG-21 on all the variants. So you were born with it, you started life. My last sortie ever, last sortie in the Air Force before I retired, was on the MiG-21. As an Air Marshal, 10 years before I retired, I went to fly the MiG-21. So I started life on the MiG-21, I finished life with the MiG-21.
So it's like you're almost like a baby.
Yes. So, you love it. The MiG-25, for what it was, its sheer brute strength and capability, the sheer power that you felt when you sat inside. The sound of those engines was something so different. When you stood outside and listened to a takeoff near the runway, the whole ground shook.
Oh, so jealous.
The whole ground shook all around near the runway area. The ATC building and everything else. A very deep growl, very deep sound. And the MiG-29 for sheer handling capability. Outstanding.
Okay, so I might pin you down to one. So if you could go up tomorrow for one last flight on the aircraft you've flown, which one would you pick? It's on the runway, ready to go. Which one would you pick, Sumit?
Bad question.
I don't think I'm going to answer it for you.
I'd like to step into all.
I know, yeah. I've
Honestly, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Put into that category of favorites because I love them all.
Yes, all different, and they've all got the quirks and all the rest of it. But this might be an interesting one for you. I'll be interested to hear your opinion on this. One you would like to fly that you haven't, either past or present?
I would have loved to fly the Spitfire.
Spit, right?
Right. And from the past. And going ahead, incidentally, I've flown the Su-30, I've flown the Mirage 2000 also. Yeah, on the Mirage, I've flown about 5 sorties. On the Jaguar, about 10-15 sorties on the Jaguar. On the Su-30, I've flown 2 sorties. And I have flown with the pilot who used to do the demonstration flights, for the air shows and stuff like that. So I've gone through the maneuvers, the full demonstration profile, the loop tumble roll, the yaw, the loop tumble yaw that the Su-30 does is extraordinary, extraordinary. I couldn't think of it on a MiG-29, but you're flying cross controls and you have the canards, operating all the time, and your engines, thrust vectoring and all that. It's phenomenal, that stuff.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So into the future, thrust vectoring aircraft, I think the fifth generation is going to be a pilot's dream.
Well, we'll link them in there in the bottom there, because we do have a lot of Indian viewers and Indian fans of our channel. A lot, actually, and this is going to be one of their favourite interviews, I'm sure, because you've had such an amazing career. But Sumit, I just want to say thank you very much for coming on the channel. It's been an absolute pleasure. I could talk to you for hours, but thank you very much to give up a bit of your time and share your story.
My privilege and my pleasure too, Mike. Thank you very much.